Thought experiments worth thinking about. Gettier Problems. Suppose you're walking past a field with a little hill and you see some sheep on top of the hill. You, being a person of astute vision and eloquence, say, "There are sheep in that field." At this point, are you able to say that you know there are sheep in the field? Then suppose it turns out that those are just some very sheep-like goats. But it also turns out that past the hill, where you weren't able to see, there were some sheep in the field. The intuition is that when you first said, "there are sheep in the field," you didn't know that there were sheep in the field, you just got a bit lucky. When Gettier first proposed his version of the problem, knowledge was commonly accepted to be nothing more than justified true belief, which your original statement about the sheep being in the field would fit perfectly. You were justified by thinking that you saw a sheep in the field, and it was true that there were sheep in the field. Nowadays, there are many competing views on what defines knowledge. Many of them are justified true belief plus something else. Maybe your justification just has to be correct in some kind of way, but some of the other ideas propose entirely new lines of thought. Suppose an omniscient, omnipotent, and malicious deity exists and is doing everything in its power to mess with your life. What would you be able to believe in? What would you be able to trust? René Descartes uses this thought experiment to eventually conclude that he can be certain that at least his mind exists in his famous line, "Cogito ergo sum," I think, therefore I am. Do you think there is anything else that would be impossible to doubt? Mary is a scientist who has been locked up and has only ever existed in a black and white room. She's had access to every piece of human knowledge and has learned extensively about the physical structures of color, wavelengths of light, how they interact with the human nervous system, and how they're processed by the brain, and many other authors' descriptions of the experiences of color. Remember though, Mary has never actually seen, for example, the color red. When she steps out of her room and looks at a red apple, does she learn anything new about the color red that she didn't know before? The idea here is that we are expected to agree that Mary does learn something new, and that this would be at odds with the type of physicalism that was quite popular at the time. The argument goes, Mary was able to learn all physical facts about color and color sensation while in her black and white room. When Mary exits her room, she learns a new fact about the sensation of seeing red, mainly its subjective character, and therefore some aspects of color sensations are non-physical events. This leads to physicalism being false. Suppose I set an apple in front of you. Did I set any half apples in front of you? This isn't really meant to argue for a particular view, but rather to get you to consider your own intuitions on what is an object. I made a video that goes more in depth on this question here. People want to travel quickly, so they invent teleporters. How it works is it scans your physical makeup very precisely, sends that information to the location you want to go, at the speed of light of course, and then a machine at that location recreates your physical structure. The caveat is that your initial body has to be incinerated. Is the newly constructed you still you? If your initial body wasn't destroyed, who would be you then? Suppose Achilles wants to race a tortoise. Since Achilles is so undeniably swift, he allows the tortoise a head start. Will Achilles ever be able to reach and surpass the tortoise to win the race? Think of it this way. In order for Achilles to overtake the tortoise, he has to reach where the tortoise is first. In the time it takes Achilles to do that, the tortoise will have moved a bit further, and this happens again, and again, and again. So every time Achilles gets to where the tortoise was, the tortoise is always at least slightly further ahead. Here is a grain of sand. If you start from any number of grains of sand that aren't a heap, then you can add one grain of sand, and you still won't have a heap, because a grain of sand is so minuscule relative to a heap of sand. So then 2 grains of sand isn't a heap, and if 2 grains of sand isn't a heap, then neither is 3, and so on and so forth, until now 1 million grains of sand aren't a heap of sand. We can do this in reverse too. Here is a heap of sand. If we remove 1 grain, then it's still a heap because a grain of sand is so small relative to a heap, so on and so forth, and now we can conclude that this is a heap of sand. Let there be a lump of clay. An artist eventually comes along and forms the clay into a sculpture. Is the sculpture a new object that was formed by the artist? Or is it still just the lump of clay that it always was? If the sculpture is a new object, then are there at least 2 objects in this space right now, both the lump of clay and the sculpture? In a similar vein, suppose that somewhere amidst nothingness there's a single black sphere. Oh wait, actually, that's wrong. There are 2 black spheres. It's just that the spheres share the same physical and temporal space, and they also share the same physical makeup. If this one is made of any composing pieces like atoms or subatomic particles, then the other is made up of those very same composing pieces, not a different set of them, but the very same particles. Is it possible for these co-located spheres to exist? Would we ever be able to determine that they do exist? And what would stop there from being more than just two?